Hello everyone, welcome to Cloud War. On today's video, we are going to be working again with the Azure AI services, and we are going to be centralizing our ideas today into the Azure Search service. So in order to understand the Azure AI services, we are going to be covering the most basic topics that you need to understand and to build successful application with this service. So we are going to take a sneak peek what is the Azure AI services, what we can actually achieve with the service itself, and we are going to explore those things that will allow us to create a successful application. Those things are like the data sources, the indexes, the indexers, and the skills too. The skills is one of the most important pieces, so we are going to do a deep dive in how to create them and how they work. And after that, we are going to be using the CLI in order to create the most basic Azure AI resources in order to have access to the Azure AI services. We will go to the Azure portal and take a quick navigation throughout those services to try to explore everything on our side. On the next video, just as an early heads up, we are going to start building the application where we are going to be creating the data source, a sample index, and also an indexer and a set of skills in order to see how everything works. So with that in hand, let's get started. Okay, so for the Azure AI services, we have three pieces of the application that are actually the core of these services. So in order to build a successful application, you will need to provide those three things. So those are the index, the data source, and the skill sets. All those three together work with the indexer, which is the main core of the Azure AI service. So let's take a look. So the first thing that you will need to provide in order to build this kind of solution, it will be a data source. The data source is the place or where all your data is going to be located. So this will allow you to use things like the blob storage, the Cosmos DB, or Azure SQL in order to feed your system. So as you can see, you can provide input data from things like Cosmos DB or Azure SQL, so that information could come from JSON files or unstructured data or structured data from the Azure SQL side. You can also work with particular tables in both cases, because you could have configuration of multiple tables on both services. You can choose what table you want to use. Also, you will have the capability to work with the blob storage, and this is a very powerful skill set, because this one on the data source will allow you to create data from PDFs, JSON files, text files, and many other formats that even cover things like images that you can put into the blob storage. From here, the second thing, it will be the skill set. We are going to take a deep dive in a moment into this service, but the skill set is going to be that pipeline that is going to take the input information that you configure into data source, and is going to process that data. As an example, if you are working with the blob storage, the skill set will allow you to get those blobs, process those blobs, like try to extract information from the PDFs, JSON files, or if you have images, you can use the OCR system in order to extract text from images and also metadata. If you are working with Cosmos or Azure SQL, the skill set will allow you to clean up the data, select particular columns, and do something with the data prior to work with them on the Azure AI side. Once you work with the skill set and you have your pipeline ready, the next thing that you need to use is an indexer. The indexer is going to be that middle point that is going to connect everything. So the indexer is going to be taking the data source, the skill set that you will use to process the data, and also the index that is going to be used in order to query your data. So here it comes into play, the index, because this is the one that will be eventually used in order to query the data from the Azure AI service. So think about the index, about that part of the application that is going to allow you to expose the result of your operations. So the indexer will take all of these three components together and is going to execute the processing. So it's going to connect to the data source or the multiple data sources that you specify, and using one or multiple skill set defines together is going to process the data. Once that data is actually being processed, that information is going to be fed into the index, and the index will be able to return that information. So following an example, if you have information from the blob storage and you have a couple of PDFs, the skill set can take those PDFs, extract the information from them, like text and things like that, and if you have a couple of images, you can use the OCR. The skill set will take all that information, will do some pre-processing, can identify the language, entities, organizations, person mentioned throughout the documents, and stuff like that. And once all the information has been prepared and been ready, all that information will be provided throughout the index. So eventually you will be able to make queries against the index using OData endpoints, which make it pretty simple, or using the SDK or the REST API, and retrieve all the data based on the documents that you provide throughout the input. So understanding everything from the Azure AI service, as you can see, from the data source perspective and the index is actually pretty simple. The most complex things to understand it will be the skill set and the indexer. But it's not that complex as it sounds. It's actually pretty simple, just taking a proper look into the definition. So let's go into the skill sets. So the skill sets is a group of operations that you can choose from the predefined side, which provide a vast group of operations like OCR, merging information, detecting language, like in this case, detecting key phrases into the documents, or splitting the information inside the documents into smaller chunks and process that data. Also, you can use things like entity recognition in order to detect things important into the documents. The entity recognition allows to do things like detecting organizations, locations, and people, and very similar. There is a vast group of operations that are already defined on the Azure utilities. So let's take a look into this example. Taking a document from the input, all the information that is being read from the data source is going to be categorized into a folder that is named documents. So all the information that you get from the blob storage, Cosmos DB, or Azure SQL, or all of them together are going to be put into the document folder. This document folder or this structure is the heart of everything and is going to allow you to pre-process something pretty simple. If we take a look into the initial example on the OCR, the input is going to be working on the image into the document, normalize, and images. So here is actually pretty important to mention that each one of these services takes an input and process an output as part of the resolution. So remember, the OCR or this merge operation are going to be services. So take a look into the green boxes in order to understand different skills that are available throughout the skill sets. These ones that are like pinkish or a little bit like orange are going to be the inputs. So all of these are going to be inputs. And the yellow ones are going to be the outputs. So now taking that into account, the OCR is going to take the input of the document into the normalized images and is going to process everything inside those folders. Once the OCR executes the process and extract all the information from the images using the OCR, it is going to save the input into the text folder under the same document. So here is summarized into the text the output, but the output is going to be consumed on the same folder. So the example will be document / also the text folder. After the OCR has been processed, we can go into the merge operation and we can process in here into the content of the documents, and we can process the normalized images and also the offsets that have been detected by the OCR into the text folder. Also from the images in here. This is going to merge all the text that have been created in here from the OCR and the image extraction with all the metadata. And using all that information, we can go into the key phrase. The key phrase is going to extract all the information from two pieces. The first thing into the right is going to be the language detection, which is going to detect in our document based on the merged text that has been created previously in the last step, which is the language predominant on those documents. From there is going to extract the language code and is going to provide that output into the key phrase. Based on the information from the merged text and the language code, the key phrase is going to analyze everything into the text and extract all those key phrases that are present into the document into smaller chunks. And the output is going to be written into the pages folder using a text item operation. From here, also from the language code, we can also use the same in order to use a split operation. The split operation is going to separate our documents into smaller chunks. Remember, for each one of the documents is going to be that part of the output that is going to be created once our documents have been explored. So as an example, if your PDF have 8 pages, each one of the smaller chunks of the 8 pages of that document are going to be split into smaller ones. This is what it's going to do. Also, an important piece is that these also take the language code in order to summarize everything into a particular language that is predominant into these documents. The output is going to be saved into the text items into the pages folder. And using the output from the split skill, we are going to be running the entity recognition. The entity recognition is going to take the the input from the document pages that have been processed previously in this step, and it's going to recognize things like organization. Entity recognition, as I said previously, could have many operations like organization, locations, and everything, so you can add multiple nodes into this one. So if you take a look into this kind of operation, this is like a pipeline, which is something pretty similar because the processes start in some places. In this case, we have two places where the processes start. We have the language detection and the OCR. And the pipeline allows us to connect the outputs from one place into the other ones. Pretty simple. And this is exactly what we can do with the skill set. All of these skill sets can be easily connected and used together. When we do the demo on the next video, we are going to be building exactly this solution. We are going to be creating an OCR from the blob storage. We are going to be merging the result from the OCR. And from there, we are going to be extracting the key phrases from using the language code from the text merges in here. After that, we will be using the split skill to create smaller documents, and then we are going to be scanning those documents to identify entity on the documents. This is also just a couple of different skills that are available. This covers most of the basic ones, but today you can easily integrate this kind of operation with things like Azure AI services in order to do more advanced things, like using machine learning to process your data and extract valuable information, or even use things like OpenAI in order to create tokenization and vectorization from your data and put that input into the chat. We will eventually go to that, where we are going to be using all these inputs and all this processing to integrate it with OpenAI in order to create a chat that is going to be answering questions from the input that we get. But that will be in the next videos. So for now, let's get focused on these initial parts. So now that we have the basic concepts, let's take a look in how to create the resources on the Azure portal using, as always, the CLI. So what we need to provide, it will be the AC search service and the create operation in here. What we need to provide, it will be the name of the search service that we would like to create. As always, we will need to provide the resource group. And here it comes the SKU. The SKU have a couple of options that you can choose from. But in this case, we are going to be using the standard one. You can try to use the free tier in case you want to avoid billing or any charges, but that will be a little bit limited, so I suggest to use the standard one if you have the capabilities to pay for it. It is actually pretty cheap, but as any other Azure service, just be aware of your billing and the usage that you are given. For the authentication option, as always, we are going to be enforcing to use the Azure Active Directory. But also in this case, we are going to be leaving enabled the API case just in case you want to play with that one. When the authentication fails for the Azure Active Directory, we are going to be given a 401. We can also give a 403 as a response. That's up to us. In this case, we are going to be leaving it as a 401. We are also going to enable the Azure system assigned identity for this service, and this is going to be very helpful because the Azure AI service is going to require access to other services like a blob storage when we connect to the data source. So this is come pretty handy to just leave it enabled so far. For the location, I'm going to use the East US2. I will leave it open to you to use whatever region works the best for you. And in this case, since we need the ID of the Azure Resource Search, I'm going to be querying that apart. And as always, I'm going to be working with an output, and in this case TSB, just to get the information. Okay, now that we have the search ID, once it has been created, we also need to get the client ID. These two last steps, what it's going to give us is going to give your local user that is authenticated throughout the Azure CLI the capability to connect to the Azure service pretty easily when we create the code. So this is just giving RBAC control to our user. So we get the client ID from our local Azure account, and after that we create a role assignment where we gave to our user the search service contributor. This role is going to allow us from the local environment to access all the resources from the SDK, and also when we go to the Azure portal, we will be able to visualize any of the resources without any major challenge. So now we go into the Azure portal. Once we execute this service, we will have everything created. And in here, we will have a sneak peek of the things that we can create. So we have the capabilities to create indexes. We have also the indexes, the data sources, and also the skill sets. There are another couple of tools like the aliases and the book sessions that are pretty handy, but that is out of the cover for now. On later videos, we are going to be exploring additional tools like the semantic ranker, which is actually pretty common. Also take a sneak peek into the identity page where you will be able to see that the season assign has been created for you and is already given for you. Okay, taking a sneak peek into the indexes, this will be the first part. Here in the indexes, this is going to be very important because we are going to be able to define all the columns that are going to be part of your index. So this is very important because when you pre-process the information using the skillsets and the indexer, the index is going to be that input. So even if you create the columns throughout the indexer and the skillset processing, if you do not provide access to those columns throughout the index, you are not going to be able to use them. When we work on the demo, we are going to be creating our query so we can access the key phrases, for example, and all the extracted data like the language code from the processing. If we take a look into the data sources, we will see that we have the capability to provide our data source using the custom button here or also using a JSON input. If we go into the basic button, we will be able to use things like the data source input in order to use a blob storage to connect to the application. This is actually pretty simple. We also, of course, we need to provide a blob account in order to be able to connect to the account and tell where the files that we are going to be using are located. Pretty simple, nothing too overcomplicated. If you want to use Azure Cosmos DB or Azure SQL, you need to provide manually the JSON configuration throughout the secondary option in here, where you will be able to build your solution. Also, you can do that pretty easily throughout the SDK, the REST APIs as well. So take that into consideration. And in the final part, we have the indexers, which is going to be the one that connects everything. But of course, we will need to provide a couple of skill sets. Here in the skill set, we will be able to build how our application is going to process everything. So we can choose from different templates, like I said previously. You can use like merge skills, split skills, translation skills, entity linking, entity recognition, sentiment analysis, and even another Azure services like the OpenAI in order to work with them. This is just a very quick sneak peek. Now with that, if we go back into the indexer, we will be able to build our indexer using the index that we have available, the data source from it, and the skill set. So the indexer is going to be that part of that factory that is going to process the information and is going to inject that information into the index when it's available and has been executed. So also think about the indexer like a job that is going to be executing everything together and output that information throughout the index. So this is a sneak peek. As always, we are going to be using more advanced techniques in order to create these resources, and in this case to create everything from the index, the indexer, the data source, and the skill sets. We are going to be using the Azure SDK on the .NET library. So join me on the next video where we are going to be doing that and creating our Flix application where we'll be able to query information for a new index. I hope you like this video. Drop any comments if you have any questions or any suggestions, and thank you for watching. See you on the next video.